There's a moment that tends to arrive in most lives if we slow down enough to let it. It usually comes after a particular frustration has repeated itself one too many times. The same kind of conflict, the same dynamic in a relationship, the same stalling at the same point. And eventually, underneath the fatigue and the familiarity, a quieter realization starts to surface. The common denominator in every situation is me. That's not a comfortable thought, but I'd argue it's one of the most useful ones a person can have. I remember the specific moment when self-awareness stopped being theoretical for me and became real. I'd always thought of myself as fairly self-aware, not arrogantly, I hope, just with the comfortable assumption that the blind spots I'd read about mostly applied to other people. And then, one day, I caught myself doing exactly the thing I would have said I never do, repeating the same approach to the same recurring problem and expecting a different result. When the result was once again the same, feeling quietly surprised. In that moment, something shifted. The problem wasn't out there. It was in here. What followed wasn't a crisis. It was actually a kind of relief. Because once you can see a pattern clearly, you can do something about it. Until then, you're driving with the windscreen fogged up. Self-awareness gets talked about a lot, but I think the genuine article is rarer than the word suggests. At its simplest, it's a willingness to look, not to analyse endlessly and not to perform introspection as a sophisticated hobby, but simply to notice what's happening within us as life unfolds without. To observe the patterns of thought, emotion, behaviour that run through your life, often without your conscious permission. It requires two qualities that don't always travel together. Firstly is curiosity, the willingness to ask honestly what's really happening here. And courage, the willingness to stay with the answer, not to immediately soften what you find into something more flattering. Together, those two qualities make it possible to see things as they are, rather than as you'd prefer them to be. Other people can be useful here too, if we're willing to listen. I remember a performance review that caught me off guard. My manager told me I had a tendency to step back from taking a leadership role. She gave me a specific example, a situation where I deferred to someone more senior, even though I knew the territory better than he did. I told myself a story about hierarchy and good manners. She named it as hesitation. Well, it stung. It also resonated. The story I'd been telling myself was comfortable. The truth was simpler and less flattering. That gap between the story and the truth is exactly where self-awareness lives. When self-awareness deepens, something recognizable changes. Decisions begin to align more naturally with what you actually value. Emotional triggers become less mysterious. Relationships deepen. You can't master what you can't see. What you can see, you can work with. I'd invite you to sit with one question. Is there a pattern in your own life that keeps repeating, a frustration that shows up in different disguises? If so, that pattern is worth looking at, not with self-criticism, but with curiosity. I explore self-awareness as the foundation of personal growth in living from the heart. You'll find more at bernardcates.com. The link's in the description. We'll see you next time.